apparatus shall not pass.
Recording started. Welcome to the Hackaday podcast. My name is Mike Stish. I'm editor-in-chief of Hackaday.
Hi, and I'm Elliot Williams. I'm managing editor of Hackaday.
We are calling episode 8 the art episode. On today's show, Joe Kim, art made from strings and CRTs, and hydrogen done two ways. All right, so we're going to have to rename the site to Hack a Minute, Elliot.
Yeah, why is that?
Because there's way too many hacks for us to not publish them every minute of the week.
This has been a super busy week.
Yeah, but first a little jibba jabba that I put down there. So we have a huge conference season coming up, and it starts...
So this weekend, the 2nd and 3rd in Munich, Germany is Make Munich, and I can't wait. I'm bringing my 4-year-old son, and he's going to freak out about the robots.
You going to try to record some audio interviews there?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. There's a HeboCon at the end. I hope to be there for that. I'll get some good photos anyway. That's usually absolutely hilarious. Commentary only works in German, but the crazy junky robots fighting it out works in every language.
Also this weekend, Tom Nardi is headed to Atlantic City for the first ever Whopper Summit, March 1st through the 3rd. We ran an article on this, and someone said, can you please define Whopper? So, oops, Matthew Broderick in War Games, the Whopper is the computer that takes over the missile defense system, and they kind of lose control of it. I'm just missing out on the Southern California Linux Expo, which takes place in Pasadena every year. It's the following weekend, March 7th to the 10th. I really hope to get to that at some point, but I'm sure you'll see a ton of Hackaday regulars there. This is just a litany of conferences.
It's springtime, and the conferences are popping up like flowers.
Hackaday is a proud sponsor of the Vintage Computer Festivals, which happen in 3 different locations across the United States. The one that's coming up is VCF Pacific Northwest in Seattle, March 23rd through the 24th. I am going to head over to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is just like an hour away from where I live, April 11th and 12th for CypherCon 4. And coming up in Chicago in April, a huge crew of Hackaday staffers and people in the Hackaday community are descending on Chicago for KaiCon, which is the first conference centered around KiCad, the open source PCB design EDA suite.
Do you mean KeyCon for KiCad?
Oh, I think there is an argument about that. I'm pretty sure it's KiCad.
I'm pretty sure it's KiCad. There's definitely an argument, and it's like it's VI versus Emacs. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, it
was made by French people, and so it is KiCad. All right, hacks it is. What you got?
So I am in love with the work of a company called Breakfast NY. And this week they had a really amazing display come out, and it was covered in the article called What Happens When You Cross a Brick with a Pixel. Basically, imagine this. You're standing in front of a brick wall that's about as tall as you are and the length of the longest wall in the room that you're in. And on one side, it's a black brick. On the other side, it's a mirror. And this 24 bricks stacked up on top of each other can rotate to make a display out of these different bricks. What did you think of this one, Elliot?
That was pretty awesome. These guys always put out good stuff. I have no idea what their budget must be.
Yeah, it must be really incredible to see the prototyping, the ones that didn't make it through prototyping. I think that'd be really fascinating. And they've been really good about jumping into the comments and talking to us about stories and that sort of thing and invite us out there. And I think we just haven't made that happen yet. So hopefully someday. Yeah. In this demo video, one of the things that I really loved is the kinematics of turning the bricks.
They rotate so smoothly.
Yeah. So not only do they rotate smoothly, but if you watch, when they get to a full revolution, they go slightly further and then decelerate back to the right place. So someone has looked at it and said, it's cooler if it were like a human turning it around and having to precisely position it because you overshot a little bit.
Huh. Interesting. I didn't notice that at all.
Oh, yeah, it's incredible. I watched that thing about 15 times. Looking back on all the things that they've done, I think The other favorite that I have, I mean, they're building these for contracts, I believe, because the other favorite that I have was for a clothing retail store, and it was a display made of 6,400 thread spools. And if
Right,
you
I remember
watch it,
that.
you're like, how can you make that thread spool change colors? Because it looks like it can go through any color of thread. And they did a really clever thing of making a fabric that looks like a spool of thread, and it loops through a pulley system that you only see the front half of the spool, but when it runs it, it pulls that fabric all around so that you can get any color on any spool. We'll put the links in. You definitely have to see this. I'm sorry that I didn't do a better job of describing it orally.
Talking about visual art is like dancing about architecture.
All right, moving right along. What's one of your favorite hacks?
Let's see. I really like curve tracing on spray painted CRTs was the name of the article, but the project is up on Hackaday.io. It's Lissa Jukebox. It's a Lissajuice dedicated Lissajuice screen TV slash synthesizer dealy by Emily Velasco, and it is amazing. Not so much because of the end product, although it looks fabulous, but because of the write up of it. And she goes through so many different procedures. It starts off with the cardboard mock up of the front panel, laser cut, because she knows she's going to want to water jet it later, so she needs a file. She plays around with acrylic, wanting an acrylic front cover for it, and tries RIT dyeing the acrylic because she heard that would work and discovers that it doesn't. And so she writes this up anyway, which is awesome. Thank you. Ends up scrounging a piece of kind of crappy aluminum and cleaning it up by using a lye solution and just burning off the top surface of it. And it ends up with this pitted, absolutely beautiful kind of patina-y thing. Note to self, or if you're doing this at home, lye and aluminum is my favorite way to make hydrogen gas in large quantities. Do not smoke around this if you're doing it, and feel free to capture the hydrogen gas and put it in balloons and then light them on fire, because that's super fun.
Can I use it to charge my hydrogen fuel cells?
Sure you can. I think yeah, absolutely.
I think that's going the wrong way, probably.
Aluminum foil and lye. Right. So she wants these to look like old school CRTs, but it's a black and white monitor, and so she gets green. I think it's some kind of transparent spray paint that's used for making stained glass effects, and does like multiple thin coats of transparent green paint on the screen, and it looks super. It looks just like an old green screen. Looks like an old green phosphor screen.
Yeah, and if you zoom in on this image, it is a mirror perfect surface. You can see reflections of other things in the room, and it just came out great. I cannot believe it's a paint job.
That's what you get if you have infinite patience to do 15 super thin coats, which I never do, but kudos. And last but not least, it uses the XR2206, which is a bizarro single purpose, I don't know what, low frequency waveform generator chip. It makes triangle, sine, and square waves at kind of audio frequencies. And then she runs these through an amplifier direct into the yokes, and that wiggles the lines around. You got to check this project out. It's got so many different details. All of them are super cool.
Yeah, so she didn't just use that chip. She actually found a really inexpensive dev board that it is on eBay, and I love getting those tips, because when you start to think about using a new chip, you think about all the support stuff that goes into it, and here the work is already done, so you can focus on 47 coats of green spray paint rather than
Exactly.
reinventing the wheel on the function generator chip you're using.
Yeah, they're really simple to use, actually. They're really great chips. I don't know if they went actually obsolete or if anyone's still making them. If they are out of production, you should snap some up before they're all gone.
I love her schematic on this, or I guess it's a system diagram.
Yeah.
Did you check that one out? Hand drawn on graph paper, and it just is like has a pleasing
Amplifier,
aesthetic.
coils, yokes.
Yeah, it's what you would expect to be on the inside of the case of the CRT screen that she's using, like the repair diagram.
Looking at the way Emily treated the aluminum cover made me think about a piece we're running just yesterday on anodizing aluminum at home. We'll put that in the show notes, so go check that out. And all of this TV hackery makes me think of the 1970s artist Namjoon Pak, who, if you don't know, you absolutely should, because he made crazy artistic patterns by doing exactly the same thing with swirly designs and beautiful hacked TVs. So I think we have an article on somebody re-investigating his old wobulator circuits. So you should definitely go check that out too. All right, what's up for you next?
Well, speaking of wobbly art design, the next one is such a delight. I think both Elliot and I, and probably everyone in the universe, are huge fans of string art portraits. And so these are a way of wrapping string around some type of frame so that where the string crosses, it reinforces the color of that string and becomes essentially a dark pixel within a picture. Although, of course, we're talking about vector graphics because the string is going point to point to point to point, and it's not actually doing individual pixels. Have I created a picture in your mind yet, Elliot?
I think I haven't seen one of these in the flesh ever, and hadn't seen the idea until we covered it in Hackaday about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, and I think the first time we covered it, it was different from this. So we should talk about the project at hand right now. It is an amazing creation of Bart Dring, who has been doing a ton of interesting machines and actually altered some of his previous designs in order to produce this masterpiece, and it truly is a masterpiece. It is robotic. It has a turntable that's about 2 or 3 feet in width, and off to one side it has a little sewing needle on an actuator arm that loops the thread around nails all around the perimeter of the turntable. And by going through the calculations of what you want the picture to end up by, the robot can predict what's the shortest direction to turn the turntable in, and has a great system that Bart explains in detail on keeping the thread at the right tension. And he did smart things like angling the nails that are around the perimeter in order to self-guide the thread down to the base of the nail.
All right.
What I mean, really, could I herald praises more for this one? It's perfect.
Yeah, super.
I think he said the one thing that he didn't like about it is the turntable rests on ball bearings, and those are kind of noisy. So he's looking to get some type of hard plastic that would reduce the noise. So what we saw a few years ago on this was fundamentally different. So it used string, but it used nails all around the surface. I think 3,000 nails and 500 yards of thread on some of those. And they're distinctly different. I really like those because you end up with something that looks like low poly art. And what Bart is doing is something that we saw done with, maybe it was a Kuko arm robot a year ago or a year and a half ago. We'll put all the links for this so you can take a look at it. But obviously using a Kuko robot for just about anything is overkill. And so I like the simplicity of Bart's design. He said he's going to release the code once he cleans it up and adds a few more features. So if you have a 3D printer, a little bit of electronics experience, and an affinity for building robots, you too can have some string art.
Well, I'll take one from way back in the way back. Teaching computing the old school way with the Digicomp 2 is an old mechanical computer toy from the 1960s. The article we covered is about a 3D printable version of the Digicomp, which is pretty cool too. Digicomps are so rare that you won't be able to find one even at a flea market or on eBay. So your best bet if you want to play with one is to print one out. And it's a mechanical computer with a bunch of little pivoty, flip-floppy levers, and you drop marbles down it and it flips them down, and you can count and add and multiply, and it gives you the absolute basics of how like an ALU would work in binary, where on bits are marbles. And it's really, really awesome. And now you can print your own. So go check out that article and fire up your 3D printers.
Yeah, I love the mechanical computer element of it because it's so hard to really grasp the abstract concept of what electrons are doing inside of a tiny chip. But if you understand with the marbles, it can go left or it can go right, and it has to do one of those two and not the other. It really unlocks your mind to follow that path of logic through the computer itself.
Yep. And you watch the little flip floppy, teeter tottery things going back and forth, and that gives you, a one over here or a one over there. And, when it carries, it goes blip, 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 blip down this little slide. It's absolutely beautiful to watch. I was reading around in the comments on that one, and someone brought up the amazing Dr. Nim, which is another mechanical computer. This one's actually a mechanical computer game also from the 60s, made by the same designer, who is John Thomas Godfrey. Thanks, Bruce, for the tip on that one. And there's a scale model, also 3D printable, of the amazing Dr. Nim game, where you can play against a mechanical marble computer of the game Nim, which I had to learn about too. And then I went totally down the rabbit hole, and following up on the Dr. Nim game, which you can print out, there was also a printable Think-A-Dot game, which is another game with internal flip-flops that you don't see, but you drop marbles and colors of things change, and the object of the game is to get the colors in a certain pattern. But every time you drop a marble, it goes left or right and flips a color. And so there's kind of a logic game going on behind that too. There's all this kind of 1960s mechanical marble computer stuff going on, and all of it is 3D printable now if you're interested in looking into that sort of stuff. So thanks everyone who wrote into the comments with cool suggestions.
All right, the next hack on my list is a robotics hack, and I had the pleasure of meeting Carl Buyega at the Hackaday Super Conference last November. And Ellie, you met him, you did an interview with him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's been doing all these crazy circuits on flexible PCBs.
What's fascinating is Carl started on this path of building PCB-based motors last year, where the coils for the motor are in the circuit board itself. And along the way, he got onto using flexible circuit board instead of the main circuit board, and then started using that as a method of providing locomotion to robots. And his latest looks kind of like a quadcopter. It's very small, maybe
Yeah, it does.
2 or 3 inches across, and it's in kind of an X pattern with a large 3/4 of an inch diameter circle at each of those 4 points. And locked into the robot itself are little rare earth magnets, and the coils push against those and kind of vibrate the robot across the table. And so he's showing off his latest work on this, which is putting 40 hertz pulses through the system, putting 50 hertz pulses through the system, putting 5 hertz pulses through the system. I loved watching how it totally didn't work. And then he went and started troubleshooting it and realized that he was tripping the protection on the LiPo battery circuit, because he's got a tiny little, I don't know, tea bag sized LiPo on this. I guess it's smaller than a tea bag, right?
Beats me. But yeah, I actually only saw the ones where he'd finally wired it up to the power supply, which I assume you're getting to.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is this is the first time I've seen it not tethered to electrical. So it's carrying its own power supply. The body itself is made out of super thin, super delicate, solid, what do you call it? Non-flexible circuit board, traditional
Right.
FR4 type of circuit board, which means that you can send off design files to a fab and get these parts back. And so he's outsourcing the hard parts of the machining, which is really cool. And it makes me think back to some of the research lab based research that we've seen over the years, except for this isn't in a research lab. This is in Carl's office or workshop, and it's a one-man band doing this, and that is incredible.
He's having an outrageously large amount of fun with putting printed circuit board inductors and electromagnets into everything he can think of and seeing what he gets. We were talking during that interview about this general idea of using a flexible membrane with the electromagnet in it and pushing against magnets and what he could do. And at the time, he had a fish-like thing that would wiggle its tail back and forth. This one that jumps on the table is like it's like a guided vibrobot on these little pads. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it reminds me of those water bugs that don't break the surface tension of water
Yeah,
and skate
right?
across a lake.
Yeah.
But the other thing, so I mentioned that it's rigid circuit board that's very delicate and small. And that made me think back to a project that we saw maybe about 6 years ago that Harvard was showing MEMS fabrication to make micro flapping drones, and what they came up with was a dragonfly. And this is really worth going back and looking at because their fabrication process is incredible. They use stack ups of different materials and use cut some of them along the way during the stack up. They have some kind of scaffold that allows them to fold like origami, these rigid parts that are connected by flexible layers into shape, and then they cut it out from this scaffold with laser cutters and then connect it to an external power supply and the wings on this dragonfly flap. It just makes me look at it and I think how many people were inspired by this. Was Carl one of those? And it makes me hope that there's this idea generation system that happens by being able to see what's happening at the highest levels of research right now and then take something away from that and put it in your own experimentation. So the spot that Carl's in right now is trying to figure out how to add stability and controllability to this, because right now it just kind of follows its own path around the desk. But the proof of concept is certainly there. And when he was talking about this, it made me think back to a project that we covered. I guess it was another research project. I can't remember where this one came out of. But it was looking at the stickiness aspect of a gecko's feet and how that can be used in robotics. And they basically developed a material that grips in one direction but not the other. And I wonder if that could be used for this robot.
Oh, there's so much crazy material science stuff out there. Yeah, the mind boggles.
All right. Speaking of boggling of minds, the next one up is gear ratios and other mechanical advantages.
Yeah, right? So 10 3D printed gadgets that just can't stay still was the secret name for the winners of our 3D printed gears, cams, and pulleys contest, which got a lot of good entries, and I was super happy to see them. The short list of winners is up in that post, and you'll see it, and there's even an honorable mention where a couple extras got thrown in there. I wanted to say that there were also a lot of really great entries that didn't even make honorable mention, but were nonetheless great for whatever reasons. And so I just wanted to super rapid fire kick through a couple of the ones that really struck my fancy, even though they weren't going to win the contest. They're awesome in their own right. One of them is Elijah's 3D printed pulleys. He prints pulleys and pulls 200-pound window frames up an old house that he needs to fix. So the gimmick is that he needs to lower these windows down safely. They're super heavy. He's like, why don't I try to 3D print pulleys? And it works. How awesome is that?
I loved it.
In a similarly implausible vein was this electric ice auger that David made. I mean, he's just using the 3D printed gears and belts to gear down probably a brushless DC motor, but a fairly beefy little electric motor, and he's just gearing it down and he hooks it up to an ice auger, and there's a video of him drilling through the ice with it, and he must go down 6 or 8 inches into the ice with this thing that's running off of a lipo pack that he made by 3D printing the gears. How awesome is that? Crazy.
I think that's really what we had in mind too on this contest is people know you can print gears with a 3D printer. Let's see if we can push them over the edge on actually doing it or talking about it if they've already done it. I think for something like this, the hacker that put it together might think, oh, no one else cares about this. And they're absolutely wrong. I loved looking at this.
Yeah, not me. I was thinking people would do crazy art stuff. Like some of the examples we put up were automata, and of course we got those and they were well represented in the winners. So I was actually surprised by someone putting together an ice auger and actually going out and drilling through the ice. I'll give a couple more real quick. Darren Schwenke's P1 Buddha tape feeder. A tape feeder is a super expensive part of a pick and place machine, and he made a really sweet one that has a second tension spring wheel that pulls that little plastic, I don't know what it is, plastic cover part back and off in a particularly beautiful way. This is a cheap 3D printable tape feeder, which is, $1,000 piece of equipment, and you can print one yourself. So kudos there. And then there were a couple others that hit my panorama slash astrophotography itch. Two more that are basically tripod toppers. Ahorn 42 with Panorama Head version 3 was a very sophisticated camera panorama head that made it located the camera lens exactly in the center where it should be if you want to make pretty panoramas, and it spun it around nice and smoothly to take huge, I don't know what it is, 2D panoramas. Marvelous piece of work. And an astrophotography camera mount. So this one tracks the sky as it goes by so that you don't get blurry, long exposures by Chris. And that one was not quite finished, so it didn't rate well in the contest, but I'm sure it'll be finished anytime soon, and you should go check it out because it looked like he was just about to completely hammer the astrophotography problem. Another one that I thought was just amazing that really made me want to go print it out right now was a 3D printed, except it was basically 2D, wind up gift card car, and it had a 3D printed spring, and you could just take it apart and assemble all the parts together, and it looked like one of those old plastic model toys that you break the little parts off and you put them together. And that was super awesome, done by Brian Brocken.
Yeah, I really loved seeing all of the variety that was entered into this contest. There was some silly stuff. I liked seeing that Greg Zumwalt, who was one of the inspirations for this contest with his wonderful 3D printed hummingbird automata, got in there with something called Darth, which was a mechanism that was kind of cam operated.
Exploding Darth Vader.
Yeah, and just
what?
I studied that mechanism for a long time because you can see it working and your brain still doesn't quite understand how it's doing it.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. Anyway, kudos to everyone who entered anything. Most of them were really great. I just covered all the ones that weren't the winners and weren't even the honorable mentions, and they were pretty awesome too. So go check out the main link and look at the winners.
All right, now we're on to the bonus round, the quick hacks, the super fire. I think we need some serious music effects for this. It should be like quick hacks.
Do you want that? Do you want that for quick hacks? Say that again, and I'll give you one this time. Do it one more time.
It makes me think of that. Yeah, it just makes me think of like the worst radio station ever. All right, so this shouldn't be a quick hack because it's really awesome. Go check out the well-protected USB power strip. Makes it easy to plug in. This is a project by Scott M. Baker, and he had the problem of wanting to plug in USB devices at his bench, but not wanting to blow them up when he plugs in his suspect prototype device that might leak 300 volts from the Nixie tube clock it's powering.
Yeah.
And so he ended up with current protection and overcurrent and overvoltage protection, and it's modular and really beautiful. So go check that one out. I really loved looking at the reverse engineering keeps Keck telescopes on track. Again, Elliot, how are these in the quick hacks?
I don't know, man. It was a tough week.
So, of course, the Keck telescopes are two telescopes that are perched on top of a dormant volcano in Hawaii. And that is custom equipment. You're not just going to pick up a new telescope and put it somewhere. And somebody's got to keep it running. And this is a story of a driver board that got repaired and repaired and repaired and repaired and can't be repaired anymore. And so
time to make a new one.
Yeah, Andrew grabbed the board and figured out what it was doing, reverse engineered it, and spun a new version to keep the astronomy alive. Finally, this one is a quick hack, and I really love the test bed for this one, which is 5 different OLED screens of 3 different sizes on a single mini breadboard along with a microcontroller to drive them. It's
Right. It was
really
like octopus.
yeah, it's my kind of hack because you start off thinking, "Oh, this circuit I'm prototyping, I'm going to make sure it's really neat this time," and then you end up with a monstrosity. So Larry Bank didn't want to use 5 different I2C buses for this and figured the workaround was using 5 different data lines but using a single clock line to rule them all. This one actually made me go back and look at your series of articles, Elliot, the Embed with Elliot, where you talked about I2C, because I was like, did Elliot talk about this?
I don't think I did.
No, you
Actually,
didn't. But I
who
still
was it?
enjoyed reading them.
Yeah, I try never to have multiple I2C buses or to do it the simplest way, which is just one bus per device and don't even worry about it.
Yeah, so I've seen this before. A lot of times chips will have 2 pins that you can put to ground or to voltage in order to address them, but that still limits you to 4 different devices, right?
I love the LIS, whatever it is, 3 something something accelerometer. It's got one address pin, so you can put 2 of them on a bus, and that's it.
Who needs more than 2 accelerometers?
Well, I mean, that is kind of crazy.
All right, I'm sure we're going to get comments on that. What are in your quick hacks, Elliot?
Speaking of too many hacks, we're supposed to like limit ourselves to 3 quick hacks. Here comes 5. Hold on to your hacking hats. Let's see, my first quick hack is actually a YouTube video. The article we wrote covering it is called Know Your Fits and Tolerances. It goes through how tightly parts need to fit together and how to specify the tolerances. It turns out this is something engineers have thought long and hard about, and if you don't know the difference between a clearance fit, a running fit, and a force fit, you absolutely need to go watch this video. This sort of stuff I ran into in making designs for 3D prints where nothing fits the way you think it will. It turns out there's a lot of science behind it. You can learn it and it will help you make better models. So go watch this video. The next quick hack up on my list is the no parts temperature sensor in your Arduino. Edward, who made the Cave Pearl project, which is a treasure trove of data logging open source code. You should totally check that out. Built an underwater data logger, wanted to know temperature, and measures temperature by calibrating the watchdog timer over different temperatures. So it runs faster when it's hot and colder when it's cold. And it turns out this is reproducible. And so by putting it in your freezer and watching how it slows down, you can then map this out, and later you can time the watchdog cycles, the watchdog wake ups, and use this to tell what temperature it is to outrageously good precision. So that's definitely something to use if you've got a clock on your system and you need to know the temperature.
I enjoyed the comment thread on this one as well because, like any good hacker, Edward jumps in there right away and says, "No, I wasn't done with the experiment yet."
Right. Sorry. Published
Sorry,
it
Edward.
anyway.
We're looking forward to seeing the results.
Yeah, right. It's not finished yet. It keeps getting better every year.
Yeah, you're always like, if I had more time, I'd put this feature in.
Yep. I was actually looking through I/O a little while ago and was surprised by how many projects from like the 2016 or 2014 Hackaday Prize are still getting worked on now and still getting improved. It's really inspiring. Next quick hack was e-ink price tags fall off store shelves onto your workbench by Aaron Christoffel. He and I were talking about that cheap chip last week, and he's like super on fire. He had just hacked a Fitbit clone, and now he gets these little e-ink price tags and discovers that the e-ink display in there is the same as the Waveshare ones that everybody uses, and so has found a cheap source of used e-ink displays. And of course, because he's just hacked this little Fitbit clone, he manages to wedge one of those in there and use it to drive it. So it's combining all of his current hacking projects together in one. You should go check that out. I looked online to see if I could find any of these. I'm in Germany. He's in Germany. I even know the store he got them from, Metro, and I couldn't find any of them online. So keep your eyes on eBay for cheap e-ink price tags. Another quick hack is common chemicals combined to make metallic sodium. This is from Nerd Rage. His YouTube videos are always phenomenal home chemistry. This one really takes the cake. If you've played around with metallic sodium, and still have all your fingers, it explodes into fire and hydrogen, which taste great together when you put it in water. And this is how to synthesize it at home. And he's actually come up with a way to make metallic sodium that's reasonably pure out of things you can actually find, and it doesn't look 100% totally dangerous. Previous synthesis methods have included fire and explosion, and this one just includes heating it up to 200 degrees Celsius and stirring for a couple days. So not bad in comparison. Why do you want metallic sodium? There's no good reason. My friend, no, it's good for desiccating things and for speeding up some chemical reactions, but if you're a redneck, it's really mostly good just for throwing in water and watching it explode.
Oh, jeez, Elliot. Oh, that scar? That's a metallic sodium burn.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fun because it gives off hydrogen and it's a runaway exothermic reaction. So that's always a winner.
Man, this is the second time we've talked about producing hydrogen on the show.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, it's Hydrogen Day. And last but not least was infinite build volume with RepRap on wheels, which is a Helios RepRap robot. And they've put it on a slant on a little bit of a 20-degree cant and put it on a truck. And so it rolls along and it 3D prints as it goes along. We've seen some 3D printers that do the infinite bed trick by angling one of the axes and just running a conveyor belt, and this is doing basically the opposite of that. It puts the printer on wheels and rolls it across a flat table. Helios is a really cool looking RepRap robot. It's a Scara build, so it has two articulated arms, one of them off the other, like a double pendulum or something. And I have been, and I know a lot of people have been wanting to see the design files for this thing. For years now, we've been watching it grow and get better and better. I would love to see the design files for this one. So if you're out there, feel free to send them to me, ElliotWilliams at Hackaday.com. Because I would print one out in a heartbeat. And that brings us to the end of my quick hacks. Let's head off into the Can't Miss articles. That's Hackaday's original content, written by Hackaday's own writers, that you absolutely should not miss in the hectic week of hacking.
Can't miss hacks. I loved Tom Nardi's teardown of AppLight's personalized projections. We've talked about Tom's teardowns before, and this is the first one for a while. I don't know how he finds this stuff. I think that's the most interesting thing is I feel like I can't find consumer items that have internals that are interesting at all, and Tom seems to do it at the drop of a hat. So I have noticed the laser projection that are kind of like a kaleidoscope pattern. People put them out in front of their house and it's pointed at their house. Their house becomes the projection screen for a moving kaleidoscope, basically, or it's kind of like a disco ball effect. But this one looks to actually make a projected display, and it was something like $20, which is ridiculous. How can you even do that? And the answer is
Crappily.
Yeah, it basically can't. I mean, he goes over one of the marketing photos, and it's incapable of doing this particular mix of colors in the display. It's comical to see Tom get to the heat dissipation part of this design. It has a heat sink and it has a fan, but then they put a closed box in between the two of them. But on the other hand, he digs into the power supply, and the power supply design looks solid, and the actual LED and the heatsink that it's on could be useful for something else. It's got a lens that comes with it. So there's a lot of interesting things inside of here. It's just probably worth a lot more if you take it apart rather than using it out of the box.
Yeah, it's another Christmas present from Tom. He did this last year at Christmas when he went through. What did he come up with last year? Do you remember?
I think it was a laser projector.
Oh, that was the laser projector where he
Yeah,
was like, "Well, at least you get a good cheap laser out of it."
that might have been a multicolor laser, like
Yeah, I
red and
think
green or red
yeah,
blue green or
exactly. I think
something.
it was two. You get two cheap lasers out of it.
Yeah, I'll
But
look it up and put. I didn't look it up before the show, but I'll find it and put it in the show notes.
yeah, I loved how Tom at the end of this one suggests that this could be a Hackaday Christmas tradition to go go through the clearance items and find some cool stuff for teardown. All right, my can't miss hack this week is Jonathan Bennett's Hack My House series. He's been fitting his own house up with a Raspberry Pi in every room and documenting turning his house into a smart house as he goes along. And this time on Hack My House, it's Raspberry Pi as a touchscreen thermostat. He's basically out nesting the nest, and he's doing it all with open source software on a Raspberry Pi with a nice touchscreen. It's a really cool system. He uses a bunch of technologies that you might be familiar with if you've ever played around with web stuff. He uses Flask on the back end, and oh man, I've forgotten the name of the data store he uses, but it's that data store that keeps a running window. We'll put this in the show notes. Anyway, it's a bunch of standard webby graphical data tools to serve up a nice looking web page as the front screen for a super smart thermostat. So go check that out if you're at all interested in home automation. And also check out the comments there. People are talking about whether you want to rely on a Raspberry Pi to run your thermostat and whether you want to have other fail safes going. And there are some people who have apparently industry background who are suggesting ways to complement the Raspberry Pi system with a backup regular thermostat system. So in case the Raspberry Pi glitches out, your house won't freeze or go up to 1,000,000 degrees or whichever your nightmare scenario is.
Yeah, I really liked that because when I was editing the article, I thought about adding something. In my mind, I thought you can just put in parallel another regular thermostat that's set to some, low temperature. Like if it gets below 55 degrees, it turns on the furnace. But I think looking at people who have domain knowledge is much better than trying to shoot from the hip on this. As we mentioned at the top of the show, we have a special treat for you this week. I was in Pasadena at SupplyFrame's headquarters and got a chance to sit down with Joe Kim. So joining us today is Joe Kim. Joe is the art director for Hackaday. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I got to say, it's amazing to have you with Hackaday and working on all these stories. I think all of the readers would agree with me in saying that a huge part of getting into an article is looking at these amazing stories that are told through your illustrations. And I think the question I always have is, how is it you get Hackaday so well?
Thanks for all those words. I think, I don't always understand like the science and like the specific like technology behind a lot of the articles. But what I do get is kind of as a person that's growing up with sci-fi, understanding the things that science and technology can take us to, and all the innovation. And like I feel like that's the spirit of Hackaday, and that excites me. And so it's fun as an artist imagining what all that stuff will look like. And so I think that mutual kind of spirit of innovation and kind of where we can go next with all this, I think that's where it all stems from.
So what's the background that got you into art in the first place? Were you going to see Star Wars and then like coming home and like drawing huge battle scenes, or what influence did that have in your upbringing?
Like most artists, we just like always draw things as we're kids, and anything that like we saw we were into, I just start drawing. Saw Top Gun, I'd be drawing F-14 Tomcats all the time. Star Wars, I was drawing Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. It's all that stuff. You see things that you love, and then you kind of want to recreate it on paper. It's a weird thing artists do.
So what's the process that you use? You find out an article is coming out, and we say, "Hey, Joe, we really need some art for this." Mm-hmm. Where do you go from there?
So I get a little note from you or whoever else is kind of writing the article, and they give me a little summary. Again, it's a lot of the times I don't always understand exactly what's going on, so they'll kind of like guide me, maybe give me a little tip on what maybe it should be, or the direction I should be doing the artwork towards, and then and then I just go for it. I try to relate it to something that I'm into, or just try to go crazy with it, try to make it more just really visually interesting for everybody to get into.
What kind of equipment do you use for your illustrations?
Most of the stuff is done on Photoshop. I have a Cintiq. It's like one of those tablets you can just, or like a monitor you can draw right onto in the office. And yeah, it's all pretty much I need.
How do you learn to use equipment like that?
I went to art school. Like I went to Art Center in Pasadena. You kind of learn. They teach you all of the Photoshop tips and tricks to try to get things done pretty quickly.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. So I love how you illustrate the hands when you're doing characters. The one that comes to mind is one of my all-time favorites, is the Edison versus Tesla battle, and I just look at the way that they're holding onto their staves, and I'm like, those hands are incredible. Yes. Am I just like a crazy person fixating on something, or is that something you think about, is how the hands are illustrated?
The hands are like so expressive on a person. It's always like a kind of a creative challenge to like get hands just right, or make them express something that you don't want to make too obvious. You always have a face, but I think to push it even further, if you draw a cool looking hand, like that'll really kind of push the message even further that you want to get to the audience.
I love that. I mean, there's all kinds of other things. Your color palettes are amazing. I love some of the times the minimalism of your images is so great. We had a recent satellite image, and you illustrated it like way cut out, and you get the feel of how small the satellite is, and I just think your use of the colors, the lights, and then the ratios to everything else is incredible. So we're so happy to have you working on those things. Now, outside of just the art that you're producing for Hackaday, you've done a lot of really cool things. Like you spoke at SuperCon, and there was another talk that I believe was not recorded that happened here at Supply Frame during a hackathon that you did on posters and art through film and through the history of that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty much what the SuperCon talk was based on. It's sort of a known thing in the design community about how movie posters used to be this art, and they used to have illustrators and painters doing them, since photography wasn't really a thing, or extremely difficult to use to manipulate images. But now that Photoshop is around and it's gotten a lot easier to use, people who don't need that artistic eye to create these images, they just have a simple tool where they can just pretty much cut pictures of people and slap them together and make a poster. And it never, it's, those people are usually marketing people, and so that's why they just want to put those faces on there to sell the movie. They don't really have that eye to make all the design like work. And so it's just a known thing now that the movie poster is no longer an art, it's a marketing tool. And the results can always end up not being as great as they once were back in the day.
So are there particular artists or just particular movie posters that you really respect and you'd encourage people to go out and look into?
The peak of those movie posters is might be in the 60s. So a lot of the illustrators back then, Bob Peak or more recent Drew Struzan, Saul Bass, who create a lot of cool, more design like type images than paintings. But right now there's a kind of a subculture of screen printed posters or movie posters that the movie studios are kind of understanding and seeing that, oh, these people want the art back in the posters, and they're starting to use those same artists for their official movie posters now. So if you saw the poster for Mother, Darren Aronofsky's Mother, or even Guillermo del Toro's what was that movie? The
Shape of Water.
Shape of Water, right. They had the same artists doing those posters, and so they had fully illustrated posters as their official release, and so you kind of see the swell of that popularity coming back, and movie studios starting to see that it's a useful tool to have artists back in the studio again.
Well, I love having this insight into, how you look at the world and how you look at art that's being used or sometimes misused. We'll definitely put your SuperCon talk in the show notes, so go and take a look at that. One of the things that I love seeing is when we publish an article that has your art on it, there's always someone in the comments that says, "Great Joe Kim art, I love it." And so, people can go, we have an original art category. You can go and see all the articles that are on there. But is there anywhere online that people can follow your work and keep in touch with you?
Yeah. I have a website. I believe it's joekimart.com. I have a Tumblr page too. I don't know if people still use that anymore. But I think that was the art of Joe Kim. .tumblr.com, but yeah, I think those are two main places you can find my stuff at.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, Joe, and look forward to many years of great art ahead of us.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike and Joe, for the interview. That brings this week's Hackaday podcast to a close. If you enjoyed any of the stuff you heard about and want to read more, follow the links page. If you want to leave us feedback, drop it there in the comments or write us directly at editor@hackaday.com. Hope you all have a good week and keep on hacking.
Well, don't you want to be taken aback?
Oh no, I'll be taken aback. I'd love to be taken aback.